Okay, welcome to the overview video for the phylum Echinodermata. This will be the first video in a series. This will be the general characteristics of the whole phylum, and then we'll move on to a different video for each of the classes that you'll be responsible for. Here are your objectives. All right, you'll need to go through all 5 of the Echinodermata videos in order to be able to meet all of these objectives. So let's have a look at some of the local ones that you'll commonly see around here. The Stochastra australis, reef star, sun star, very common around Leisure Island, very common around mussel beds. Here is a cushion star, which you'll see everywhere, but all over Pilot Bay by the hundreds of thousands, maybe the millions. Here's an 11-armed starfish, also very common, let's say around the Tauranga Harbor on sandy bottoms and margins of rocky reefs. A mottled brittle star, you'll find these in rocky areas that if you turn rocks over, they'll be hiding underneath them. Snapper biscuit or sand dollars, very common down at Pilot Bay on the in the 2 to 4 meter zone. Everybody knows what a kidnap looks like. Spiny little urchin. And here's a sea cucumber. And here's some very large asteroidean echinoderms from deep water taken from the sampling off of the Tongaroa. So they do get pretty big. Alright, phylum Echinodermata, general characteristics. And if we pull up, let's go with the red. Alright, spiny skin. So, echino, there we go. And then there's your spiny. And there's our root word derm, which we've seen a lot of times, which means skin. So spiny skin. Where do echinoderms live? They pretty much only live in marine environments, not terrestrial, not freshwater. So see as you go through these videos, especially this overview video, you can understand why. This is a question to ask yourself. And the adults are all benthic, so they don't have any planktonic adults. There are no planktonic adult echinoderms, although they do have larval dispersal stages. Alright, so there's Symmetry, which is an interesting thing that is different to all of the other phyla that we'll be looking at. It's called pentamerous radial symmetry. So if we remember radial symmetry, just imagine that's a circle and then I can draw, then you can cut this anyway in half and you'll wind up with 2 equal halves, no matter which way you slice it, as long as you go through the radius in the center. Okay? And if we take pentamerous radial symmetry, penta, of course, means 5. And so you start with your radius, and you draw out 1, and then you go out 2, and then you go out 3, 4, 5. Okay, so if these were all equal, you can imagine that these 5 equal slices of a pie are show the symmetry, so they are symmetrical with each other. You can, if you follow the wording, draw that in half, and both sides will be the same. You can go in half along here, and both sides will be the same, just like a 5-pointed star. 5 equals. Okay, they have a skeleton. All echinoderms have a pseudoskeleton, and they're composed of calcareous ossicles. So when you see that calcareous, that means calcium carbonate. And we've seen that in other phyla such as the spicules, some of the calcareous spicules of certain sponges and bivalve shells and numerous other things. Okay. Here are the ossicles, and you can see that there are different shaped ones in a single individual, so they don't all have to be exactly the same shape. But if you take this chalk star and you dry it out and you erode away all of the soft tissue, you'll wind up with these plates. Notice that the plates aren't really, they're not stuck together so much. There's connective tissue in between each of the plates, which gives the starfish its flexibility. When you pick up a starfish, it's not rigid like a sea urchin, but it is actually flexible, and so they have that little bit of connective tissue to allow that mobility in between the plates. Here you go, you can see the difference between the plates that are fused together, okay, on the ossicles of a sea urchin, and these ones have these little bumps for the spines to attach, but obviously the shell is rigid and there is not that connective tissue between the ossicles. And taken to an extreme, and the connective tissue makes up the majority of the outside coating in the sea cucumbers, and the cups have been reduced to these microscopic little what they call sclerites that are embedded in the skin of the sea cucumbers, and they're unique to this individual species. Excuse me. That can be an aid to identifying the actual species of Holothurian if you're stumped from other characteristics. They have something called a water vascular system. Okay, this is a vascular system. Of course, it is tubes that are connected to each other, very much like our blood vascular system. Let's have a look. All right, so this is the way that this is a system that all echinoderms have, and it's unique to echinoderms. They have something called a madrepore, which opens to the outside environment, and it's like a sieve. So water is sieved out, large particles are sieved out as water goes in or out of the system. Okay. Then there's a stone canal, which is very hard and leads from the madrepore into the main system. There's the ring canal that goes around like a donut, and that is in the central area of the body, leading out to each of the arms. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so if we draw something like this around it, you can sort of see the shape of the starfish, of each of the arms. There we go, like that. So now you've got 5 points of the star's arms. Okay, so the ring canal leads to these canals that radiate down the arm. That's the radial canal, like the radial spokes of a bicycle wheel or something like that. And then laterally off of the radial canal, you have a small canal here that leads off to this thing called an ampulla. There's an ampulla, right? And the ampulla is like a big sac that can squeeze in or out, and it can open or close, and that fills with water or pushes water out. The water is then pushed down the podium to a sucker. Okay, so these things, if it's like a hypodermic needle that so when the chamber of the hypodermic needle is when the plunger is pushed down, it shoves water down the length, so that would lengthen this sucker out of the podium out, and the sucker would extend. If the ampulla opens up, it's like pulling the plunger of a hypodermic needle up, and that would cause the podium to shorten, withdraw, and the sucker to grab a hold. We'll be looking at some of the videos of this and talking about it more in class. But you can go to YouTube and have a lot of looks at how the tube feet of the water vascular system work. Now, with the this whole system here, the ampulla, podium, and sucker, is known as a tube foot. And these animals can have thousands of these things. Here's a close-up of the madrepori, which you can see acts as a beautiful sieve to keep particulate matter out of the system from the water column. Go through the next few slides, stop the video so that you can have a read through of these, but for the sake of the expediency, I'm just going to go through these very quickly. All right, for reproduction, mostly they're dioecious, so they're mostly either male or female, and they broadcast spawn. They just erupt their sperm and eggs up into the water column at a particular time with an environmental cue and hope they find each other. Taxonomy. Asteroidea, that is the sea stars. Ophiuroidea, brittle stars and basket stars. Echinoidea, sea urchins, sand dollars, and heart urchins. Class Holothuroidea, sea cucumbers, and finally Crinoidea, sea lilies and feather stars. So we'll do a separate video for each of these with their overall, their overview characteristics, and what we've covered in this video applies to all of the echinoderms. You might as well take the time to go ahead and put these names onto flashcards and start learning them. Okay, see you in the next video.